All right. Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here. For our next lesson, actually this is going to be a bit of a long video. I'm going to be kind of cutting it up into chunks based on a few different things that we're going to be dealing with in this lesson. So first things first, our warm-up today, again, if you're not in class, is pretty simple. Just study time before you take your quiz. Once you do that, and once we are done with the quiz, we're going to talk about then our our next steps, where we're going. So we have 2 lessons left in this unit officially, and once we're done with those, we'll talk about some other things going on. Let's see. So we've got today, as you can see here, we're describing the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation and then comparing the concerns of the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists with the Constitution. Once you're done with your quiz, okay, your next step should be that you're telling us who would you be. You're going to take a little personality quiz here. Are you going to be a Federalist, an Anti-Federalist? What would you be if I slapped you back in 1800, or give or take? Click right here. Okay, if this quiz does not work, we will do this manually in class, and I will explain how that happens, just to, again, make sure that nobody is lost here. Okay, this is a personality quiz thing. Okay, it's not actually anything that anybody would judge you for today. So it's got a series of questions that it will lead you through, and at the very end, it'll tell you what you are, which is very nice. Now, outside of that, okay, once you get done with it, we will do this debrief in class, and let me go ahead and do that now. So when the first version of the American government fails, which we'll talk about, there is then going to be a second attempt made at trying this American experiment thing, and that is going to be the Constitution. Well, wouldn't you know it, people disagree about what should be in the Constitution, and many of the fights that center around kind of who's getting what kind of power in the Constitution. So, for example, the people who will eventually become known as the Federalists are in support of the ratification of the Constitution. Those who are not are called the Anti-Federalists. So some general trends, and we'll talk about these more next class, is that Federalists are kind of big fans of concentrated national power. They tend to be a little bit more fans of the British, and the Anti-Federalists, they're not necessarily opposed to the Constitution entirely, but they are vehemently opposed to it until the Bill of Rights is added. The big thing with the Anti-Federalists, and kind of the big theme that I probably should have slapped down here, and I'll just probably go ahead and do that now, is favorite central bank. Yeah, we can add these in here. Favor a strong... we're just going to do on-the-fly revisions here, because this is fine. Favor a strong central national government. And we'll make this look nice here in a second. And the Anti-Federalists are not. They are going to be in fans of favor giving more power to individual states, as opposed to the national government thing. So anyways, what does this mean? Well, we're starting to talk about how power is structured in the United States. And this is going to be a big deal because, like, whether you're not, like, for example, like the Federalists, if you're from, like, the New England area, like a lot of Federalists are, that's going to start to put you in conflict with people who are elsewhere in the country, like rural landowners, or people who like the French, or people who like state power. All of them would probably be Anti-Federalists. So again, this is just something kind of fun that kind of we can do after taking that quiz there. So what are our objectives today? Here's what we're really trying to hammer home. We are going to talk about the concerns of the Anti-Federalists and Federalists with the Constitution. We'll get there. But first we have to talk about the first attempt to create an American government and the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, as they are called. So there's your note outline if you need it. I'm going to get back into presentation view so things look nice here. And let's do this thing. Okay, so again, we're going to be looking a lot about in this lesson about how should a country be structured and organized, and again, when you're making decisions about these things, like you're having to decide like who's getting power as opposed to who are we taking it away from. And one of these questions that a lot of the people in power who are setting up these experiments, we should call them, in government, are trying to decide, for example, like what's the correct amount of democracy? On the one hand, do we want King George, which we just went through that, and that was terrible? Or on the other hand, do we want the purge? And that and pure anarchy is also equally undesirable. So that makes decisions like really difficult, right? Like trying to walk that very narrow tightrope is hard. And so you're gonna see the attempts made here are very difficult. Okay, so anyways, let's go on. So after the revolution's over, now what? Who is it fought for? How is this government going to be designed? What does it mean to even be American? What was this? What was it all for? These are all questions I think in many ways we're still trying to figure out. We don't have good answers for these things. So anyways, more questions than answers, right? So the attempt at the first American government is something called the Articles of Confederation. Okay, and you're like, I've never heard of these things. That's because a lot of people look back at them as an abysmal failure, which it really pretty much was. The first attempt of the founders, as we might call them, at an American government does not go so great. And let's talk about why that is. Okay. So the Articles of Confederation were this idea of an American government. Okay. So let's break it down. Number one, it's got a Congress of 13 members. I wonder where they get that number from. I had no idea. Also, okay, it had this, again, talking about a national government here. It has no judicial, meaning no judges on the national level, or an executive branch, meaning there's no president. There's nobody driving the boat, driving the ship, whatever. Okay, driving the car here. Okay, laws, if they wanted to pass, would require a 3/4 vote. Okay, and if you wanted to change the articles, you had to have a unanimous decision among all 13 members. Okay, which again, you can't even get half of those people to agree on one thing that's in particular should be done, let alone 3/4, let alone all of them if you want to completely change the articles. The other thing is that the Articles of Confederation government, this Congress, had no ability to tax states or individuals. So again, think we're just coming out of the American Revolution. What are colonists not down for? And that's taxes. And just to like iron out here a pretty much a steel ironclad rule of history is that money is power. And if you have no ability to gain money, you have no ability to have any kind of power. It's also very weak compared to the states, and we'll get back to hear more on that in a second. Okay. So, again, notice how the Articles is very influenced by the flavor of the times, right? Which is coming out of this, Revolutionary War that was against a king, etc., etc. So the big problems with the Articles, very little central authority. Money is power, and you can't tax. And there's no president, which means, again, there's no uniform direction that this thing is going. And also, unanimity on changing the Articles is impossible, okay? But there is one silver lining that we have to mention about the Articles that is really, really important, and I'm going to move my face here so you can see this. The Articles of Confederation Congress passes something before it dies, called the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, okay? And there had been previous Northwest Ordinances before this, but they were kind of the ones who laid the foundation for this. What is it? Well, the Northwest Ordinance is this idea, it's kind of got multiple components to it. Number one, it creates the way in which we get new states inside of the Union, as this thing is called. And specifically at this time, it was for Midwestern states. But this practice of how a state becomes part of the United States gets carried on. And by the way, if you want to know how that's done, you have to have a certain number of people occupying an area that becomes a territory. Then that territory can apply to Congress for statehood, and Congress has to approve it. Okay, and then the other big thing, the Northwest Ordinance explicitly prohibits slavery in territories in the Midwest, because again, it's the Northwest. We would call it the Midwest today, but in the Northwest areas. Okay, so states created by this. Why does this look terrible? Why did that look so bad with the formatting? So specific states that are created by this. Okay, Ohio, our own, Indiana. Okay, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin. You don't need to know these states. Just know that you're sitting in some place that is part of the Northwest Ordinance. Yeah, that's a big deal. But here's what's going to break the AOC, okay? The Articles of Confederation are going to break because of a revolt that happens in Massachusetts, okay? This kind of gets complicated. It gets into a whole bunch that has to go on with states' taxes and some debt payments that were happening back from the Revolution. Technically, the Americans were trying to pay back the British for some things they did. I don't know. It gets complicated. And this causes something called Shays' Rebellion. Now, Daniel Shays, who was the farmer, he actually was a veteran in the Revolutionary War, leads all these farmers on this basically rebellion in the state of Massachusetts. And they just run wild for a good long time. But the problem is that because the Articles of Confederation are so weak, they have no president who's in command of an army. There's no standing army. That's an absolute no-no at this time. Because again, like, how do Americans think of standing armies? They think of them as like something that's going to oppress them, right? And no taxes. So there's no national force that's able to crush this thing. And eventually Massachusetts comes along and is able to get rid of this. But the event of Shays' Rebellion makes it very clear that a new and revised government for structure for the colonies is needed. Okay, and that's where things go and break. Let's get to that. Okay, now to help you understand kind of what's happening here is not only have many prominent Americans at this point rebelled once against the standing government, meaning Great Britain, they're about to do it twice. Because technically this is also treason, like 2 times over, right? Because you're going to say like, okay, this was a failure. And again, like if you wanted to change the articles, you had to do it with all 13. So again, just kind of think about that for a moment, right? But that's going to bring us to the Constitutional Convention, okay? So the Constitutional Convention takes place in May 1787. And again, like, you know, the Revolutionary War is over in 83. And it takes, you know, like another, you know, few years of lumping along as part of the AOC to realize that something is better is needed. The Constitutional Convention is a meeting that occurs several times, actually, for months on end. And what happens is there's many influential Americans there. Everybody from Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton. I mean, you name them, they're there in terms of the founding fathers. But what kind of takes place is that there's going to be 2 plans for the country that are going to dominate the debate about what should come next. And what starts to happen is there's a divide, as you would likely expect. We have the New Jersey plan and the Virginia plan. Okay. Now, eventually what's going to happen is a solution gets hammered out by a dude by the name of James Madison. Okay. He's going to forge something called the Great Compromise. And that is going to be what our current Constitution is. Okay. Madison really wrote the vast majority of our current Constitution that we're running under. Okay. Let's talk about then what these plans were. Okay. Now, the New Jersey plan and the Virginia plan. Okay. And then they're going to have a baby and it's going to be beautiful. We're going to call it America. We'll get to that in a second. The New Jersey plan, okay, is like a revised Articles of Confederation. That's basically what it is. If you're New Jersey, you're a tiny state, and you're like, okay, we have so little power here, we have to do something that's going to give small states power. And what it was, basically, is you you basically take the Articles of Confederation. Again, same idea. One house legislature. Every state has an equal number of representatives, and what we're going to do to that is we take our beautiful flaming dumpster fire of an Articles of Confederation, and we're going to slap a president on top of it. Okay, and that's what the New Jersey plan is. Now, you have to understand, who does this favor? Well, this favors small states, because if you're New Jersey, you have 1 bajillionth of the population, as a historian would very famously claim, of Virginia. And so this gives small states way more power than large states in terms of, like, being representative of your population. Now, Virginia and the other large colonies at this time, the Carolinas, for example, New York also, looks at this and is like, this is garbage. No way we're doing this. We're doing the Virginia plan. And large states go for this one because what it said was that how many representatives you get is based on your particular state's population. And this, again, would favor large states, because New Jersey is going to get like 2 people, and then Virginia is going to have 50,000, right? Again, over-exaggerating for the point of that you can understand it. Now, what happens here is they're going to take James Madison. Okay, he's going to take these two and he's going to slap them together, and they're going to make this baby that we call the Great Compromise. Okay, so they take again, elements of the New Jersey plan, the Virginia plan. They're going to combine them together into this hybrid monstrosity that is our Constitution, that is so dense and really, really thick, and in many cases very brilliantly written. And again, it's going to have a lot of problems, though. It's a flawed and equally cool document. Okay, so what is the Great Compromise? Well, you're going to have a 2-house legislature. One is going to be the Senate. Okay, and in the Senate, every state gets equal number of representatives. Okay, and that is 2 for a total now of 50 states, 100 representatives. Okay, the House, your number of representatives is determined by your population. Okay, so again, notice the Senate is more like the New Jersey plan. The House is more like the Virginia plan. All right. Now, of the 2, also please understand the connotations that go along with them. For the House, like if you're a House member, that's notable. Okay, it's like good for you on being part of the House of Representatives, but being one of the 2 representatives of your entire state as part of the Senate is thought of as a much more prestigious, like kind of gentlemanly, statesman-like kind of position. And they also make some rules as to how often these people get elected. In the Senate, you have terms of, you're part of it for 6 years. In the House, you only have 2-year terms. So the House is more responsive to the people, as they would be called, as opposed to the Senate, which is more kind of long-term responsive, if that kind of makes sense. Okay, so the ratification of the Constitution. The supporters of the Constitution and of big, strong national government power, okay, they want the Constitution as it is, okay, are known as Federalists. Okay, so these are going to be people like Washington, Adams, Hamilton, Madison at first. Okay, he'll change. They wanted power to be centralized and strong. And these leaders, Hamilton goes as far as saying that Washington should become a king, which everybody looks at him as like, you're an idiot. But they understand that you cannot go back to an Articles of Confederation. At the same time, though, you have opponents, okay, who favor state power, okay, they're called the Anti-Federalists, like Jefferson, Patrick Henry, Madison, later he'll switch over to this side, who think that concentrated power like that is a threat to liberty. You're like, they're basically saying, guys, we're going to be back in the exact same situation that we were with Great Britain. If you want this king to be, like this president, that you're going to call him, to be centralized and, powerful. Now, the eventual ratification of the Constitution, okay, between these 2 sides, and there's vigorous disagreement in the Constitutional Convention, and it involves a ton of negotiation. And I'll just give you one example just to help you realize how nasty this gets in terms of things. Let's take the example of slavery in the Constitution. Okay, the Constitution explicitly protects slavery. It doesn't use the word slavery, but it protects it. And it has stuff in there, like, for example, like the 3/5 clause. okay, where slaves, for the purposes of congressional representation, okay, were counted as 3/5 of a person. Because what the South wants to do is the South wants to say, no, a slave is a person. And the North is like, do you really believe that? And the South is like, no, we really don't. But they should count for us in terms of how much representation we get in, the House of Representatives. And then at the same time, the North is like, slaves aren't really worth a full person. They're less than human. So this is a pretty awful thing, right? Like, and the 3/5 clause is explicitly in the Constitution as to how the federal government's going to divide up power. So this, again, is just one example of there's a lot of horse trading that goes on with this document back and forth. And there's going to be even further things down the line about like where Washington, D.C. should be, located, or the nation's capital. That gets into a whole nother story, though. So, anyways, for your exit ticket for this lesson, I want you to do 3 things you learned, 2 questions you have, and 1 way something you learned connects to today, okay? And I'm going to stop the mini lesson right here because that is the last slide. However, okay, the thing that we need to go and talk about as part 2 of this video here is your Honor and Slavery project. Okay, now this video is going to be your definitive walkthrough if you need to look back at this, or maybe you're seeing this for the first time via YouTube, on what this thing is. Okay, let's talk about it. So you should be done with chapter 5 of Honor and Slavery by now. If you are not, you better get on that right quick because we got things to do. Okay, let's talk about the basics. Okay, if you didn't know this was coming, I talked about it a lot in class. The Honor and Slavery project, okay, what it does is it does 2 things. Number 1, it counts as a quiz grade in and of itself, right? So you got to do it. It counts as quizzes again are like 25% of your grade or some really high percentage, right? It's worth a lot of points. The other thing that it does is that as long as you attempt a very solid shot at it, right? And I'm saying like C or above, give or take, that also will, no matter what, replace your worst other quiz or test grade to 100%. Okay, so this thing is totally worth it. And again, I wouldn't have spent so many weeks having you guys read Honor and Slavery if there wasn't something behind this thing, right? Besides it being debatable, interesting, this gives us kind of a chance for you to really show off what you know. Okay, ignore the sirens in the background as I'm recording this video. So, okay, let's talk about then what this thing is. Okay, I'm just going to read this so you can hear me, and I will elaborate as going on. Honor and Slavery has taken us on a journey through the ethics, culture, and behavior of those living in the southern colonies and states. Understanding this world occupied a lot of the focus of this book. As Greenberg, the author, admits, overall, my goal has been the goal of a translator. Okay? See, I opened up my window to cool things down. I got bugs flying across my screen. Below, you will find a project, actually several different ones, that will push you beyond this simple understanding. You'll be applying your new knowledge and skills to create an opportunity for others to learn about the world of honor in a meaningful, applicative way. Think of this like developing a tool for someone to understand this world and all of its components through an activity of your design. Okay? And that's what you're doing here. You are creating a teaching tool. Okay? Something interactive, something playable, something fun that can actually help us. We'll get to it. Okay? So here's the goals and objectives of this thing. Okay? A user of your project should. Notice, not you. Okay, a user of your project should interact with the system of honor through a meaningful activity, and after using it, they should be able to explain how honor works, its component parts, behaviors, etc. A good product will have the user experience honor rather than directly and boringly be taught it. So, no papers. Okay? No essays here. And the closest you will ever have the option for that is a digital textbook, but we'll talk about what that is, okay, if you want to go down that route. So again, it's playable, it's interactive, it's going to be meaningful, and again, we'll look at tons of examples here. Okay, be exposed to accurate, detailed information that's well sourced. Okay, obviously you've got to know what you're talking about. And then 3, be presented with a clean and professional product. It doesn't look like you put it together the night before. So let's talk about what you can do with this thing. Okay, you have got literally all the options under the sun. Okay, I have had students, no joke, do every single one of these options that is here on my screen right now, and they're amazing. Okay, I've had students make choose your own journey games. I've had them make board games for me. Okay, skit scripts, children's books, diary entries, rap songs, poems, newspapers, explosion boxes, and you're like, what the heck is that? Check it out. Click on the button. Sketch notes. I've had them program video games for me. Okay, I've had them make models. Okay, like for example, like dioramas. Okay, comics, draw my lives, and there's even more ideas here. Okay, I mean, I could go and talk to the nth degree about collections of bumper stickers and things that have been done. Okay, here's the idea. Okay, again, all these things are something you're creating that's a teaching tool, right? There are so many different ways you can take this thing. The important thing, and I'm going to come back here to my rubrics, and I'm just kind of scrolling down here on it, is that you hit these 4 things. Okay, Project explains, and I'm just going to zoom in here so you can really see this thing, through a meaningful, nuanced learning experience, how the world of honor works. Okay, what students have typically done is you pick 1 to 2 components of this honor thing, like baseball or cross-dressing, and you deep dive into it. Okay, so again, like, don't try to do everything. You literally have to write a book to do that. Don't do that. Pick one thing that really interested you. And again, there were so many things: lies, duels, noses, masks, dressing as a woman, gifts, strangers, humanitarianism, death, slave rebellions, a pro-slavery argument, baseball, hunting, gambling, right? And help that person understand how honor works through that. Okay, is it fully accurate and detailed? Do you make citations correctly? Again, citations are really easy. Honor and Slavery, Chapter 3, page 25. Right? It's simple. You don't need to do MLA, Turabian, Chicago. You get the idea. Project appears prepared and expertly crafted. Design adds to the academic understanding of the work. Okay, so again, it doesn't look like you put it together the night before. That'll be a disaster. Don't do that. Okay. So, again, the options here are huge. Okay, I've had students do all of these. They're amazing. There's a couple general recommendations that I will give you outside of, and again, I'll have models in class that you can check out. Again, you can click on the buttons here yourself and check them all out. I have had students typically do a few different things that I would kind of caution you and give recommendations for. Number 1, start thinking about ideas now. Okay, this is going to be due. You can see the exact specific due date in our lesson today. I'm not going to say it because I'd like to save this video for future years, just to save me the time of re-recording. But the biggest thing that I've seen is that the more producty, if that makes sense, more artsy your thing is. So let's say you make an art gallery, right? And you do some really, really cool paintings, and I can pull some up here for you. Just be aware that simply putting together some art does not necessarily mean that you've taught that person how the world of honor works, right? So again, I'll pull this up for you so you can see it here. I've had some students do some really impressive stinking artwork, and it's awesome. Okay, but the thing is, like with the top picture and the left one, what a student did, okay, and I will make sure I have this open for you guys, is they went to Flipgrid, and I just had like a very blank Flipgrid thing open for. They could record up to 10 minutes, and they took Flipgrid, they made a video explaining why they drew what they drew. They talked about how honor, played into the picture, and they went in and explored it in a deep, meaningful level, and then they downloaded that video. Okay, on Flipgrid, you can do this. You just grab a QR code, and they pasted it on the back of their artwork. Okay, so it was kind of like a combination thing. Again, the more artsy, like, your work, again, and I put this here, you'll probably need to add like a rationale. I mean, you could write paragraphs if you wanted to here, but again, it's not just paragraphs alone, right? Same thing, like, again, if you're gonna make, I've had a ton of students make rap songs and poems and these kind of things. I have tons of models of them that you can look at here. They're really good. You don't have to perform them. However, if you write a song, okay, or you make a poem, or whatever you want to do, okay, slam poetry, whatever it is, you need to understand that simply reading it does not necessarily guarantee that your user understands how honor works. You may need to, and I've had a student do this, and I'll try to pull it up for you in class if I can. He did a rap video, but then he made like a lyrics genius next to it that explained what each lyric in his song was about, and then backed it up with citations in the text. And it was so good, okay? Again, be thinking about, like, okay, I've made something, but does that necessarily guarantee that somebody understands what I've made? Okay, that's a very different question, right? So I hope this has been a good overview, okay, of things. Before you go, and I will have you do this in class no matter what, but if you're doing this online for the first time, here where it says Honor and Slavery Project, here's where you turn it in. Okay, it's inside that folder. And then right here at the very top, it says Honor and Slavery Project Brainstorm. Okay, I'd like you to do that. It's like, take some time. Like, what might be a couple, 2 or 3 things you might be interested in? And then there's a couple other questions there I'd like you to look at too. Okay, so other than that, this has been a long video. Again, I apologize for that. But I'm really, really excited to see what you guys all make for this. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.